welcome to our webinar on missing beneficiaries. The interesting part about the topic today is this is certainly a conversation that we get involved with time and time again, and it's often the what's next of some of the work that we do, where we identify decedents, and then it's that what next section. So we're going to run through that today. Today with us, well, first of all, my name is Jason Sauer. I'm a business development manager here, but I wanted to introduce the more important people, that are on with us today. We've got both of our directors of operations and client services. Mike, Irey, and Lindsey have been with us for a number of years, and we'll walk through the topic today in regard to what's new, what are some of the best practices, what have we seen, what data sources do we have, a lot of different topics covering beneficiaries. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Lindsey Tate-McDonald. I'm the Director of Client Services here at PBI. Been with PBI for about 7 years or so. But PBI itself in general has been in business over 4 years. If anybody understands clients' needs and issues and lack thereot data, it's really PBI. I have had the opportunity and pleasure to speak with hundreds of clients over the years and really understand a lot of the issues that they face on a daily basis with trying to fill in missing gaps of their data in general, not just beneficiaries. But so I wanted to just talk to that briefly. A lot of the common problems that we hear from clients on a daily basis is just how do we fill in these missing gaps in our data? So a lot of those could be companies going through mergers and acquisitions, TPAs managing their clients' portfolios, technology being outdated. So a lot of common problems we hear from clients is a lot of this information that they have is still on paper documents in a file, right? How do they get that information into their databases where they can share it and utilize it in a proper way? So here at PBI, we have lots of different ways of how to fill in those missing gaps. Today, we're specifically talking about beneficiaries. But part of that, even trying to identify beneficiaries is still trying to making sure that you have good data on the participants themselves. So making sure that they have updated names, address information, dates of birth. We see that on average, about 2.3% of participants that are over the age of 65 pass away on an annual basis. Part of the challenge of identifying those deceased participants is making sure that you have the good information ahead of time to be able to identify those deaths and be able to fill in the missing gaps. But so that is kind of the problem at hand at the beginning of part of it. Mike Irey is going to discuss exactly how the BeneSearch service can help fill in those pieces of beneficiaries that you have missing. Most of the times when you have missing beneficiaries, it's just a lack of communication from the participants themselves. So a lot of those participants are getting married, getting divorced, moving, changing beneficiaries on records. A lot of times they just have the lack of knowledge to understand that they need to communicate back with their former employers to update all that paperwork. Mike Irey is going to go all over our BeneSearch service and how we can start filling in those missing gaps for you.
Thank you, Lindsey. Appreciate that. A little bit about me. My name is Mike Irey. I have been the Director of Operations here at PBI for a little over 3 years. I've been with the holding company for PBI for over 10 years. BeneSearch is a product that we've had for almost 10 years now, but with a heavier emphasis within the last 5 years as more and more clients have asked for this product. We've built out a robust process and system to handle BeneSearch that we refined and continue to refine to this day with the goal of finding at least one first-degree relative, first-degree relative being a parent, a child, a spouse, or a sibling. We don't focus on stepchildren or aunts, uncles, grandparents, grandchildren, neighbors, or friends. Some of that might pull through, you might be provided that information, but the focus here is on first degree with the heaviest emphasis on spouse. We have a team dedicated to reviewing BeneSearch. That's all they do. We've completed tens of thousands of these over the years. And because this team has done so many of these, they understand the little quirks and little details that's needed to find some of our more challenging beneficiaries. Every result gets reviewed by 2 people. We have an initial reviewer, and then we have a QC process before it gets back to the client. BeneSearch was built to look for deceased participants. However, we can do it if the participant is living. We've had a number of those come in. I will say our confidence level is a little lower on relative relationships if the person's living, but we do find a good amount of relatives either way. A little bit about our process. The first thing we'll do when we take a file in is we'll go out and get updated data to confirm the participant information. What we're looking for is, do we get the right social security number, the right name, the right date of birth, the right addresses, and the right date of death if provided by the client. If for whatever reason we feel like some of the data is incorrect and we're not finding the proper person that's linked to what was provided to us, we'll go right back to the client and ask them to take another look at their data. It is common for us to update locations, potential dates of birth, some last name changes, those sorts of things. We do that pretty regularly within the account. The next step, once we feel confident that we have the participant and we can give you back that same data or updated data, especially around locations, is we'll look for any potential relatives. We go out to our various different data sources to pull in potential relatives that might be related to the participant. The data that we'll give you back on the relatives are their name, their date of birth, their address, and phone number if available. We give you the best known phone number and best known address for each relative. We can pull in up to 15 relatives at a time. As I said, we focus first on first degree relatives, but there's potential for second or third degree relatives to pull through as well. Our next step is now we're going to try to confirm the relationship of those relatives. So we'll pull in various different sources, one of them being the obit if the participant is deceased. And the obituaries, we're really strong with those if they're in the last, after 2010. Between 2010 and 2000, it's a little weaker only because not as many people posted obituaries online. And pre-2000 is a little harder. That said, we do have ways of going back and looking at old newspapers or any other kind of method in which somebody might have posted an obituary, and we are able to find those as well. We also will look for marriage and divorce records. We have a entire section devoted just for that, and we've cataloged all 50 states and their requirements for marriage and divorce records, what they can provide, what they cannot provide, the time period in which they can provide it for, whether it's a specific year or decade in which they're stronger at, as well as how we can obtain that information. We are stronger with marriages than divorces. That's just kind of the nature of the business. Marriages are a little easier to come by, divorces are a little harder, but we do go out for that as needed. We'll also confirm via usually an SSA or a state record of a death record hit. If for nothing else, if we can't find a marriage or divorce or an obit, we can at least confirm that this person is deceased if provided that he was deceased. And some of these death records, they do give you some insight into the marriage, if the participant was widowed or not, or divorced. Sometimes that does pull through. Once we have this data, we go and look to update the relationship of the relatives. Before we provide any data back to you, as far as our confidence level, we'll want to have 2 sources confirming that the relationship of a relative, especially the spouse. If we only have one source, we'll mark that relationship as possible. If we have 2 sources, we'll mark it as confirmed. That way, we have confidence level going back to our client that this is a relationship. We also look at various other vendors as well. Sometimes obituaries aren't as robust. Sometimes marriage and divorce records aren't as complete. So we have other methods that we use to go out and look for additional data. We've looked at family trees, census write-ups, blog posts, all kinds of different things that we have access to help us kind of fill in the gaps and make a full, complete picture of the relationship between the potential relatives. As I mentioned, we use two sources to verify the relative relationships. The heaviest emphasis is on the spouse. All relatives will be marked if they're alive or deceased, but the spouse will go a step further. If the spouse is married or divorced based on the information we provided, we'll let you know that. If we believe the participant has never been married, it's not quite common, but it does happen, we'll certainly point that out. If we believe the participant, and we're not quite sure one way or the other, but it's unlikely he's been married for some reason, we'll point that out as well. There are times where we just won't have enough data to make that determination, and we'll mark it as we're unsure if the participant was married or not. But we'll want to give you an answer one way or the other on the marriage between the participant and the spouse, whether we believe it's a spouse or not, and if the spouse is alive or deceased. As far as some data on that, a little over 80% of our participants, we have an answer for you on the spouse, and over 95% of the time we'll find at least one relative. The focus here is on living relatives as well, but if for whatever reason there are no living relatives, we'll want to make sure that you're aware of that as well. Once we get through that process with the initial reviewer, somebody will QC it, make sure that all the proper steps were done. If there's anything missing or we're not hitting the what our guidelines are to make sure we have one living relative and a spouse, we'll look deeper. But once all that's complete and finished, we'll make sure to get that out to you. We have orders coming in for one participant. We have orders coming in for thousands. They're each prioritized and get done as soon as possible. We have a queue that we manage to ensure that all things get completed on or before their due date.
So Mike talked to you all about back-ended process and what we're looking for and the information that we utilize to update it. On this slide, you'll see an example of the information and the output that we provide back to you. So you can see this is a very detailed report. We give you information on the participant that was submitted. So address history, dates of birth, date of death. If they weren't a known deceased participant, we'll provide that information to you. You get, like I said, complete address history. And then we start diving into the relatives that we've identified. You will receive name information, their dates of birth, age, their current address location, phone number if we can find it, really everything that you need to make contact with that beneficiary and communicate with them. Again, Mike Irey had stated before, we do comb through marriage and divorce records. Certainly, if we find any of that information, we're providing it to you in the report. We don't provide the actual certificate, but we're able to gather all that information that are in those records and provide them back to you. We report the way that we found the deceased participant. So if that was through the Social Security Administration, if that was a state source, if we found that death through an obituary. If we did find the death through, or either way, if we do find an obituary that's published, we provide that published obituary for you, the text of that within the report. So you can easily see the connections that we made as well. So oftentimes, what you can always depend on in an obituary is that they do provide relatives in there. So if they were married, spouse's name, if they had children, those are usually typically in there as well. And really any information that makes you feel, that provides, makes you feel confident on the information that we're providing back to you. So not only do you get a PDF of all the data that we found to you. We also provide all this information in an Excel report as well. We find that clients like to have both versions. One is visually easy to view and can put into their records. Two, on an Excel point, it's easier to manage. They can port that information into their systems or pass that along internally a little bit easier.
Thanks, Lindsey. And thanks, Mike, as well. I think what we wanted to do was actually just take a look at a couple examples. To some extent, this is kind of like preaching to the choir here, but by way of using our BeneSearch service, here's just a couple of examples by way of a case study, or maybe what you could call application. So recently with us, I had one of my clients deliver a file to us, and they were looking for deaths, right? Much like what a lot of our clients are. As part of that analysis, and we were looking at term vested folks, deferred, and in pay. As part of that analysis, we actually found that there were a number of people that were in their term vested population that were deceased. And as such, they died as a term vested participant. They went back and checked their records, and obviously they died prior to application, so they were not in pay. And what they had found was a number of those individuals did not have any beneficiary information that was recorded in the system, right? So back in the day, we used to say that the cards didn't get translated, maybe the information is mixed up or what have you, but for whatever reason, they did not have good records around the beneficiary. So what we were actually able to do is use the ad hoc service called BeneSearch and go in and find surviving spouses for those individual. And then so outside of that, obviously what you're able to do is, was the spouse, living at the time of death? Were they not? Were they due a benefit? You kind of walk through your plan documents or, the benefits that you offer. And what this particular client was able to do was actually find spouses that weren't just due a payment, but they were also due medical benefits as well. So, when you think about your fiduciary responsibility, looking out for the participants, having their best interest in mind, it's not just for the main folks, but also for the beneficiaries as well. So that's one case study, if you will. The other interesting application that we're running into more and more at this point is, and we will have this PowerPoint, it will be distributed. With that, you'll see a reference to this. So you'll have a website that you can click on. But the guidelines that the DOL came out with early 2021, I believe it was January, where they talked about what to do in regard to missing or lost participants in a plan. And by the way, that's a DB, so a pension plan, could be a 401k, 457, 403b, what have you. But it talks specifically about the activities that you need to do as a fiduciary or plan sponsor. And, again, that's in a plan, that's for uncashed checks, that was even with plan terminations. If you read through those, it mentions beneficiaries multiple times within those, recommended steps. We won't call them required, but we will say what is recommended by the DOL or the guidelines. So where we've run into folks that are either working through an internal audit of their populations or of their census files, or, God forbid, an outside audit that they're trying to work through, beneficiaries and the documentation thereof, and having them available or looking to them for information on a missing participant is a material part of fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility. So, we will have that link if you need that in this presentation as we distribute that. But really, it's good practice. Know your participant, know the data that's around them, be able to find them by touching base with the beneficiaries, and really be always this term that we throw out, audit ready. So in thinking through BeneSearch, how is it available today? And not trying to give you a sales pitch, just trying to tell you how you can actually move forward with the service. There's a couple different ways today. One is it is available as an ad hoc service. So just like Mike had mentioned, sometimes we'll get BeneSearches, a handful of them, but we've certainly seen files of a couple thousand, right? It depends on the challenge that you have. It depends on the problem that you're trying to solve. So it's certainly available under our locate services section that you see here over on the right-hand side as an ad hoc service. So you do have the ability to submit one at a time through our secure locate portal. It's also available, and it's important to note that the beneficiary service, not BeneSearch as an individual product, is available in our flagship product, which we have in the middle here, which is called Census. And again, if you're having issues, if you're attending because you've got questions around beneficiaries, you either can solve them on a one-off basis, or you can talk to one of our reps here, and we will walk you through how to handle that kind of en masse and how to keep those records up to date at all times in regard to your census file. And a big part of that is our Census solution, which will not just find missing participants or deceased participants or pensioners within your plan, but will also keep your beneficiaries up to date on a continual basis. Available via ad hoc, also available in some of our ongoing services, mainly Census. Who do you contact? Well, there's a couple ways you can do this. One is you have my contact information here. Certainly feel free to contact me. I can push you in the right direction. So there's always that. Off our website, we do have, our general contact information, 800 numbers, things of that nature. Or if you have a rep that you're currently dealing with here at PBI, it's always great to contact them, or if you're an existing client, contact your account manager. And any of us would be more than happy to listen, to answer any questions and see how we can help you out. So with that, we have just about 5 minutes left. And I know we have a few questions that have come in during the presentation. So let me grab a couple of those. And Lindsey and Mike, if you can just be prepared. I'll try and throw these to the appropriate person, but you're more than welcome to trade off as well. So bear with me here as I look at these. I think first, let's see. Mike, I think I'll throw this over to you. How do you confirm the person is deceased?
Great question, Jason. We have two methods. We will look through two primary methods. We'll look at SSA or state record hit, and we'll also use obituaries. Those are by far two primary ones that gets about 95+% of our deaths. But there could be additional other sources we might be able to use, but primarily those two.
Okay. And with that, and I think you had mentioned turnaround times, kind of ASAP or, as quickly as possible. But do you have an example of, maybe a project or what like an average turnaround time would be?
For our smaller projects, somewhere between 1 to 10 participants, we aim to get it done within a week. Okay. For larger projects, maybe 20, 30, 50 within a month. Anything over 100 participants, we'll communicate with the client a due date right up front, make sure that they're comfortable with it, and also try to provide them results along the way, so don't just get all the results at the end. We are flexible with the timing on which they would like the results, whether that's weekly, every 2 weeks, once a month. We'll set the target for how they want to get those results given to them and provide them along the way.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. Lindsey, here's one for you. What do you need from a client to get started in regard to BeneSearch?
Yeah, great question. So minimum required data points that are needed for the search is participant name, SSN, and if they are deceased, that we ask that you provide the date of death as well. Nice to know fields are zip code, so location of that participant, date of birth. That really helps us identify deceased participants' information, pull in and find obituary text so we can provide that in the report.
Mm-hmm.
If you are missing any of that information, PBI certainly has a ways in other services that we provide to pull in that missing information. So let's say that you have the name and address, but you're missing the social security number. We have services that can provide any part of those missing data points that you have. You just contact us and we can walk you on how to start those services.
Huge. Okay, great. Thank you. We have one last question, and I know that we're running short on time. So what I'll do is I'll throw this out. If anybody has a burning question that you want to ask before we end, I'll answer this last question and then enter it in your chat. We'll try and pick that up prior to closing down today. If we don't get to your question, we'll certainly get back to you after the webinar, though. So the last one that I have, if there's no others, is it's always a good question. What can you legally do when you've exhausted all options? We get asked these kinds of questions all the time, and I always joke a little bit, right? Because I'm not an ERISA attorney. I don't even play one on TV. So for me to kind of give prospects, clients legal advice, I always try and stay away from that. But generally what I consult or what I encourage people to do is, certainly talk with your internal counsel, external counsel if needed, some type of, ERISA expertise. But what I will say is, from a practical matter, what Lindsey had shown in regard to that deliverable report, right? Or even, kind of the brass tacks on the deliverable around the Excel spreadsheet is, Mike's group does a bang up job with what they do, and they document everything for you. So that's probably one of the biggest parts about, a lot of our services is it's not just the data that you're getting, but it's also the documentation that's behind the data, right? In some products, we'll call it like a diligence summary report, but it's the documentation. So from a legal perspective, if there's ever questions about any particular individual, you're not only able to say, hey, here's what we have within our plan documents, or here's what we do, but you're also able to not just repeat that process, but pull out the activities that happened, and then also, just like Lindsey had shown, either an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF to prove that. So any questions, any issues down the road, you always have that documentation, and that's a huge part. And by the way, last comment on that is available in our ad hoc services, but it's also a huge part of our premium service, which is CertiCensus as well, because that's actually a whole solution and all of the services combined. So if you ever have any issue, you're actually able to jump back into CertiCensus and you can, pull all of that information out. So it's a great question, though. Let me see. I think with that, we are 1 minute over and we do not have another question, but certainly after the fact, if you do have any questions or if you need any follow-up, we do have an email address down here at the bottom of the screen, which is mine. Again, you do have account managers for existing clients. Certainly they're a wealth of knowledge. Or if you are dealing with a rep already today from a sales perspective, I'd encourage you to circle back with them on questions too. So with that, we will go ahead and close this one down for today. Appreciate everybody attending. Have a great day, and look for the email as a follow-up coming out shortly. Thanks, everybody.